The black glove found near Nancy Guthrie's home has been processed. DNA has been extracted from the interior fabric where skin cells and biological material accumulated during wear. That DNA has been analyzed, amplified through polymerase chain reaction, and converted into a genetic profile that is unique to the individual who wore that glove. The profile is complete. It is usable. It is scientifically valid evidence that can identify someone with certainty if you can find a match. And investigators entered that profile into CODIS, the FBI's combined DNA index system, the national database containing millions of DNA profiles from convicted offenders, from arrestees in states that collect DNA at the time of arrest, from evidence collected at crime scenes across the country. They ran the search. They waited for the system to compare the glove profile against every profile in the database looking for a match. And CODIS came back with no match. The person who wore that glove, the person whose DNA was inside it, is not in the database. They have never been arrested for a crime that required DNA collection. They have never been convicted of an offense that put their genetic profile into the system. CODIS, for all its power and all its millions of profiles, cannot tell investigators who this person is. But that does not mean the DNA is useless. That does not mean the investigation stops. That does not mean the person who wore that glove is safe. Because there is another way to use DNA evidence when CODIS fails. A methodology that has solved dozens of cold cases in recent years by using genetic data in ways that go far beyond traditional database matching. A technique that does not require the perpetrator's DNA to be in any database, but only requires that some of their relatives, their cousins, their second cousins, their third cousins, people they may have never even met, have uploaded their DNA to public genealogical websites for the innocent purpose of exploring their ancestry or finding distant family members. It is called forensic genealogy, and it is about to be used to identify the person who came to Nancy Guthrie's home on the night of January 31st, 2026. CODIS had no match, but somewhere in his family tree, in the genetic records uploaded by relatives who have no idea they are connected to this crime, is the trail that will lead investigators directly to him. His cousins trying to find their Irish ancestors. His second cousins building family trees to share at reunions. His third cousins who took DNA tests as gifts and uploaded the results to find relatives. They have unknowingly created the roadmap that will expose him. If you want to understand how forensic genealogy actually works, how investigators can identify someone from DNA evidence even when that person has never been arrested or entered into any database, how family trees and genetic databases combine to solve crimes that seemed unsolvable for decades, then you need to subscribe to True Crime Vault right now. This is the channel that breaks down the real science behind criminal investigations, that explains the techniques law enforcement actually uses, that goes deeper than headlines into the forensic reality of how cases get solved in the modern era. Hit that subscribe button and turn on all notifications because this case is developing and the forensic genealogy work is happening right now as we speak. Hit the like button as well because it helps this detailed analysis reach more people who want to understand how modern investigation actually works. Now let us examine exactly what forensic genealogy is, how it has revolutionized cold case investigation, and how it is going to be applied to identify the person whose DNA was in that glove found near Nancy's home. Forensic genealogy, sometimes called investigative genetic genealogy or forensic genetic genealogy, is a methodology that combines traditional genealogical research with modern genetic analysis to identify individuals from DNA evidence. The technique was developed and refined over the past decade through the work of pioneering genealogists who saw the potential to use consumer genetic testing databases for law enforcement purposes. It became widely known to the public in April 2018 when it was used to identify the Golden State Killer, a serial murderer and rapist whose crimes in California in the 1970s and 1980s had remained unsolved for more than 40 years, despite extensive investigation and despite DNA evidence collected at multiple crime scenes. That case, the arrest of Joseph James DeAngelo at age 72 for crimes he committed decades earlier, demonstrated to law enforcement agencies across the country that forensic genealogy was not just theoretical. It was practical, it was achievable, and it worked even in the most challenging cases where traditional investigative methods had completely failed. The fundamental principle of forensic genealogy is elegantly simple but extraordinarily powerful. You do not need the perpetrator's DNA to be in a database. You only need the DNA of people related to the perpetrator to be in a database. Because genetic relationships are scientifically measurable through the analysis of shared DNA segments. When you share a common ancestor with someone, you inherit segments of DNA from that ancestor. Those segments are passed down through generations, and the presence of shared segments between two people indicates a genetic relationship that can be quantified and used to determine how closely related they are. The closer the relationship, the more DNA you share. Parents and children share approximately 50% of their DNA because children inherit half their genetic material from each parent. Full siblings also share approximately 50% because they both inherited half their DNA from the same two parents, though the specific segments vary due to the randomness of genetic inheritance. First cousins, who share a set of grandparents, share approximately 12.5% of their DNA. Second cousins, who share great-grandparents, share approximately 3.1%. Third cousins, who share great-great-grandparents, share approximately 0.78% of their DNA. These percentages are statistical averages, and the actual amount varies between specific pairs of relatives due to the randomness of which segments get passed down through each generation, but the principle holds true across all degrees of relationship. People who are related through common ancestors share measurable amounts of DNA. And that measurable sharing is what allows forensic genealogy to work, even when the relationships being detected are distant and the shared ancestors lived many generations ago. Here is how the process unfolds step by step from the moment CODIS returns no match through to final identification. Investigators start with DNA from crime scene evidence. In Nancy Guthrie's case, that DNA came from the glove found near her home. The glove was collected, documented, and sent to a laboratory for analysis. Forensic scientists extracted DNA from the fabric using established protocols for DNA recovery from fabric evidence. The DNA was isolated, purified, and then analyzed to create a genetic profile. For traditional CODIS searching, that profile is created using a technique that examines specific locations in the genome called short tandem repeats, or STRs. These are places where short sequences of DNA, typically 3 to 5 base pairs long, repeat multiple times in a row. The number of repeats varies between individuals, making them useful for identification. A standard CODIS profile examines 20 core STR locations plus additional markers, creating a genetic fingerprint that is unique to an individual except in the case of identical twins. The CODIS profile from the glove was entered into the database and searched against all existing profiles. When no match was found, investigators knew they needed a different approach. That approach is forensic genealogy. But forensic genealogy does not use STR profiles. It uses a different type of genetic marker called single nucleotide polymorphisms, or SNPs, pronounced SNPs. SNPs are individual positions in the genome where the DNA sequence varies between people. Instead of looking at repeating sequences like STRs do, SNP analysis looks at specific letters in the genetic code and identifies which version of that letter a person has at hundreds of thousands or millions of positions across their entire genome. Consumer genetic testing companies like 23andMe and Ancestry use SNP analysis because SNPs provide information about ancestry and relationships across the entire genome, rather than just at a few specific locations like STRs. A typical consumer genetic test analyzes between 600,000 and 700,000 SNP positions, creating a detailed genetic profile that can be used to identify relatives, to determine ethnic ancestry, to trace migration patterns of ancestors, and to detect genetic variants associated with health conditions. To use crime scene DNA for forensic genealogy, investigators need to convert their sample from an STR profile to a SNP profile. This requires going back to the original biological sample, the DNA extracted from the glove, and reanalyzing it using SNP testing technology instead of STR technology. This is only possible if enough DNA remains from the original sample, and if the quality is sufficient for the more extensive analysis that SNP testing requires. Fortunately, modern DNA extraction and amplification techniques have become extremely sensitive. Even small amounts of biological material, amounts that would have been considered insufficient for testing 20 years ago, can now produce usable genetic profiles. If the glove contained enough skin cells and biological material to create a complete CODIS profile, it almost certainly contains enough to create a SNP profile suitable for genealogical database searching. Companies that specialize in forensic genealogy, companies like Othram, Parabon Nanolabs, and others, have developed proprietary methods for extracting maximum genetic information from limited crime scene samples. They use advanced laboratory techniques, specialized reagents, and optimized protocols designed specifically for the challenges of forensic samples, which are often degraded, contaminated, or present in very small quantities. These companies work with law enforcement agencies to take samples that produced CODIS profiles and generate SNP profiles compatible with what genealogical databases require. Once the SNP profile is created from the glove DNA, it can be uploaded to genealogical databases. The two largest and most commonly used databases for forensic genealogy purposes are GEDmatch and FamilyTreeDNA. Let me explain what these databases are and how they work, because understanding the databases is essential to understanding how the identification process proceeds. GEDmatch is a free website created in 2010 by genealogy enthusiasts who wanted a tool for comparing genetic data from different consumer testing companies. If you took a test with 23andMe and your cousin took a test with Ancestry, you could not directly compare your results because the companies keep their data in separate systems. GEDmatch solved this problem by allowing users to upload their raw genetic data files from any testing company and then search for genetic matches across all uploaded data, regardless of which company originally processed the test. The site became enormously popular among genealogists and family historians. By 2018, it contained more than 1 million uploaded profiles. By 2020, that number had grown to more than 1.3 million. Users upload their data, the system compares it against all other uploads, and users receive lists of genetic matches showing other users who share DNA with them, along with estimates of the relationship and tools for comparing exactly which segments of DNA are shared. FamilyTreeDNA is a commercial genetic testing company founded in 2000 that offers direct-to-consumer genetic tests, similar to 23andMe and Ancestry. But unlike those companies which focus primarily on ethnicity estimates and basic relative matching, FamilyTreeDNA has always emphasized genealogical research and has built extensive tools for genealogists to analyze their results, build family trees, and connect with genetic relatives. Their database contains genetic data from their own customers, plus uploaded data from people who tested elsewhere, and uploaded to FamilyTreeDNA's systems to access their matching tools. Both GEDmatch and FamilyTreeDNA became valuable resources for forensic genealogy because they contain genetic data from millions of people and because they allow searching and comparison across that data. When law enforcement uploads a crime scene DNA profile to these databases, the system treats it like any other upload. It compares the profile against all existing profiles and returns a list of genetic matches. But the use of these databases for law enforcement purposes has been controversial and has evolved significantly since 2018. When news broke that the Golden State Killer had been identified through GEDmatch, many users were shocked. They had uploaded their DNA to find cousins and build family trees. They had not anticipated that their genetic data might be used to identify relatives who were criminals. Privacy advocates raised concerns about genetic surveillance, about people being implicated in investigations through their relatives' actions, about the lack of consent for law enforcement use of data that was uploaded for genealogical purposes. In response to these concerns, GEDmatch implemented a new policy in 2019 requiring users to opt in if they wanted their data to be available for law enforcement searches. Users who did not actively opt in would have their profiles excluded from law enforcement searches. This policy dramatically reduced the size of the law enforcement accessible database from over 1 million profiles to approximately 200,000 profiles initially, though that number has grown as more users have opted in and as new users have joined and chosen to allow law enforcement use. GEDmatch now maintains 2 separate databases. The standard database includes all users, regardless of their opt-in status, and is used for regular genealogical matching between users. The law enforcement database includes only users who have explicitly opted in to allow their data to be used for law enforcement purposes. When investigators upload a crime scene profile, It is searched against the law enforcement database, not the full database. FamilyTreeDNA took a different approach. After initially allowing unrestricted law enforcement access to their full database, they implemented a policy in 2019 requiring that law enforcement use be limited to cases involving violent crimes, specifically homicide and sexual assault. They do not require user opt-in. Their position is that solving violent crime serves a compelling public interest that justifies searching the full database, while restricting use to the most serious offenses addresses concerns about overreach. So, when investigators working the Nancy Guthrie case upload the SNP profile from the glove DNA to these databases, the GEDmatch search will run against the opt-in law enforcement database of profiles from users who have agreed to allow such searches. The FamilyTreeDNA search will run against their full database under their violent crime policy. Between the two databases, the search will potentially compare the glove DNA against well over 1 million genetic profiles looking for matches. Before we go further, take a moment to make sure you are subscribed to True Crime Vault and that notifications are turned on. This case is moving fast and developments are happening regularly. The forensic genealogy work that I am describing is likely happening right now as investigators and genetic genealogists work to identify whose DNA was in that glove. When that identification is made, when an arrest is announced, you want to be here to understand exactly how the science worked and how the investigation used that science to solve the case. Hit that like button as well, and drop a comment below telling us whether you think forensic genealogy will successfully identify the person responsible for Nancy's disappearance. Do you think his relatives have uploaded DNA to these databases? Do you think this technique will work in this case? We want to hear your analysis and your predictions. Now let us continue examining exactly how this process will unfold. The database search runs automatically once the profile is uploaded. The system compares the uploaded crime scene DNA profile against every single profile in the database, looking for segments of DNA that match. When it finds shared segments, it calculates the total amount of shared DNA measured in centimorgans, which is the unit used to quantify genetic distance. The more centimorgans of shared DNA, the closer the relationship. The results come back as a list of matches ranked by the amount of shared DNA. At the top of the list would be any very close matches, people who share large amounts of DNA indicating first cousin, second cousin, or similar close relationships. Further down the list would be more distant matches, third cousins, fourth cousins, fifth cousins, people who share smaller amounts of DNA, indicating more distant common ancestors. In an ideal scenario for investigators, the search returns close matches. A second cousin match, for example, would share approximately 200 to 620 centimorgans of DNA. That amount of sharing indicates that the crime scene DNA and the matching user share great-grandparents. Great-grandparents are typically only 3 generations back, born in the early 1900s for someone who is middle-aged today. Building a family tree back 3 generations and then forward to identify all living descendants is manageable work that experienced genealogists can accomplish in weeks. But searches do not always return close matches. In more challenging cases, the closest matches might be third cousins sharing approximately 90 to 200 centimorgans, indicating shared great-great-grandparents 4 generations back, or fourth cousins sharing approximately 20 to 85 centimorgans, indicating shared great-great-great-grandparents 5 generations back. The more distant the matches, the further back the common ancestor, and the more descendants that need to be traced forward to the present day. Studies have shown that for people of European descent in the United States, the probability of having at least one match at the second cousin level or closer in the combined GEDmatch and FamilyTreeDNA databases is now approximately 60 to 65%. The probability of having at least a third cousin match is higher, approaching 90%. And nearly everyone has fourth cousin or closer matches in these databases because fourth cousins are so numerous. Most people have hundreds or even thousands of fourth cousins, and the odds that at least one of them has taken a genetic test and uploaded to a genealogical database are very high. So, when the glove DNA profile is searched, matches will almost certainly be found. The question is how close those matches will be. Close matches make the genealogical work faster and more certain. Distant matches make it harder and more time-consuming, but still achievable. Let me walk you through what happens after matches are identified. This is where the actual genealogical research begins and where the specialized expertise of forensic genealogists becomes essential. These are not traditional law enforcement investigators. These are professional genealogists, people with years or decades of experience researching family histories, building family trees, working with historical records, and understanding the patterns of inheritance and migration that shape how families develop over generations. The genetic matches returned by the database provide usernames and estimated relationships, but often do not provide full names or detailed family trees. Users of genealogical databases control how much information they make public. Some users have extensive family trees attached to their profiles that can be viewed by anyone who matches them. Others have minimal information, just a username and perhaps a rough geographic location. Genealogists working on forensic cases have to work with whatever information the matches have provided. The first step is to identify which matches are most useful for tree building. Matches are clustered into groups based on which segments of DNA are shared. If you have 10 matches who all share the same segment of DNA with the crime scene profile and with each other, those 10 matches are likely all related through a common ancestor who contributed that segment. That cluster represents a specific ancestral line. If you have another 5 matches who share a different segment, they represent a different ancestral line. By clustering matches, genealogists can focus their research on building trees for specific ancestral lines rather than trying to work with all matches simultaneously. For each cluster, genealogists start building family trees for the matches whose information is most complete. If a match has a public family tree showing their parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents, that tree can be extended backward to find earlier ancestors and sideways to find all descendants of those ancestors. Census records are invaluable for this work. United States Census records from 1790 through 1950 are publicly available and show who was living in each household at 10-year intervals. You can trace a family backward through census records, seeing where they lived, who their children were, when children were born, and identifying relationships. Birth certificates, marriage licenses, and death certificates provide precise dates and locations for vital events, and often include parents' names, which allow trees to be extended backward another generation. Church records of baptisms, marriages, and burials provide similar information and often cover earlier time periods than civil records. Immigration records show when families arrived in the United States and often include information about family members and places of origin. Military records document service and frequently include extensive personal information, including family details. Newspapers are an extraordinarily rich source of genealogical information. Birth announcements, engagement announcements, marriage announcements, obituaries, anniversary celebrations, family reunion notices, all of these provide details about family relationships and help confirm connections between individuals. Modern newspaper archives have digitized millions of pages and made them searchable online, allowing genealogists to find relevant articles quickly. And in the modern era, social media and internet searches have become critical tools for genealogical research. Facebook profiles often include information about family relationships, locations, employers, life events. LinkedIn profiles provide career histories and locations. Public records databases aggregate information from multiple sources. All of these resources help genealogists identify living individuals who are potential descendants in the family trees being built. As trees are built for each genetic match in a cluster, the genealogist looks for common ancestors. If 5 matches in a cluster all descend from the same couple who lived in Pennsylvania in the 1880s, that couple is the most recent common ancestor for that cluster, and the crime scene DNA, which shares the same genetic segment with all 5 matches, also descends from that same couple. The person whose DNA was in the glove is a descendant of that 1880s Pennsylvania couple, just as the 5 matches are. Once the common ancestor is identified, the work shifts to building the tree forward from that ancestor to the present day. This is called descendancy research, and it is the most labor-intensive part of forensic genealogy. The Pennsylvania couple from the 1880s might have had 6 children. Each of those children might have had 4 or 5 children of their own. Each of those grandchildren might have had 3 or 4 children, and so on through multiple generations to the present day. A couple from the 1880s can easily have hundreds or thousands of living descendants today. The genealogist must identify as many of those descendants as possible and trace each line forward. This requires systematic research through the same types of records used to build the tree backward. Census records show children in households. Birth records document children being born. Marriage records show women taking new surnames. Death records help determine which lines ended. Obituaries often list surviving children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, providing roadmaps for extending trees to the present. Modern records and internet resources are essential for recent generations. People alive today can often be found through public records databases, through social media, through address records, through employment information. The genealogist builds out comprehensive family trees showing every identified descendant of the common ancestor, or at least as many as can be found through available records. And this is where the case shifts from pure genealogical research to investigative work combining genealogy with law enforcement information. Because at this point, the genealogist has a tree with potentially hundreds of living descendants. Not all of them can be the perpetrator. Most of them can be eliminated based on information that investigators already have about the crime. Age is the first and most powerful filter. If the crime occurred in 2026 and security footage or witness descriptions indicate that the perpetrator is an adult, you can immediately eliminate everyone born after approximately 2005. If the perpetrator appears to be middle-aged in footage, you can narrow further, perhaps to people born between 1970 and 1995. If there are specific physical characteristics visible in footage such as height or build, those can provide additional filtering, though they are less definitive than age. Geography is another critical filter and one that eliminates large numbers of descendants quickly. If the crime occurred in Tucson, Arizona, and the perpetrator clearly had local knowledge of the area and access to the victim, you prioritize descendants who live in Tucson or southern Arizona. You eliminate descendants who have lived their entire lives in other states or countries, unless there is specific evidence of recent travel or relocation to the Tucson area. Take a moment right now to visit the True Crime Vault channel and browse through our other videos. We have extensive coverage of other major cases where forensic genealogy played a role, cases where DNA evidence that produced no CODIS match eventually led to identification and arrest through exactly this process. If you want to understand how this technique has been used in other investigations, how it has evolved, and how success rates have improved as databases have grown, those videos provide valuable context. Subscribe while you are there so you never miss an upload. Like this video, and leave a comment with your thoughts on whether genealogy databases should be accessible to law enforcement for serious violent crimes. Now let us continue with how the filtering and narrowing process works. After age and geography, investigators apply every other piece of evidence from the investigation to filter the descendant list. If investigators know from the Walmart backpack investigation that someone purchased an Ozark Trail hiker pack in the Tucson area in a specific time frame, they can check whether any descendants on the family tree match Walmart transaction records. If investigators have developed a 40-name list of persons of interest through other investigative avenues, they can check whether any of those names appear among the descendants. If investigators have cell tower data or geofencing data showing which phones were in proximity to Nancy Guthrie's home during the critical time frame, they can attempt to match that data to descendants. If investigators have information from the Google search data about who was searching for Nancy's address, they can check descendants against subscriber information from internet service providers. Every available piece of evidence gets cross-referenced against the descendant list. Employment information can be relevant. If the perpetrator is believed to be a delivery driver based on other evidence, you can check which descendants work in delivery or logistics. If the perpetrator had knowledge of security systems based on how the cameras were disabled, you can check for descendants who work in security or technology fields. Any connection between what is known about the perpetrator and what can be learned about individual descendants helps narrow the list. Criminal history can be checked for descendants who remain after initial filtering, while the perpetrator is not in CODIS, which means they have not been convicted of offenses that require DNA submission. They might have other arrests or convictions that did not trigger DNA collection. Minor offenses. Old convictions from before DNA collection became standard. Traffic violations. Any criminal history that suggests capability or propensity for the type of crime being investigated becomes relevant. The filtering is iterative and systematic. Start with all identified descendants of the common ancestor. Eliminate everyone who does not match the age range based on the estimated age of the perpetrator. Eliminate everyone who does not have connections to the relevant geographic area. Eliminate everyone who does not match physical characteristics if those are known with confidence. Check the remaining names against Walmart records, against the 40-name list, against Google search data, against cell tower data, against employment databases, against criminal history records. With each layer of filtering, the list gets smaller. The goal is to reduce the list to a manageable number of final candidates who cannot be eliminated through available evidence. In some cases, the list might narrow to a single individual who matches everything and who is the only person in the entire descendancy tree who fits all the known parameters. In other cases, the list might narrow to 5, 10, or 20 individuals who all fit the available evidence and who all need to be investigated more deeply. At that point, direct DNA comparison becomes necessary. Investigators need actual biological samples from the remaining candidates to compare their DNA directly to the crime scene DNA from the glove. There are several legal and practical methods for obtaining those samples depending on circumstances and on the standards in the relevant jurisdiction. Voluntary submission is the cleanest and most straightforward method. Investigators can approach individuals and explain that they appeared in a family tree connected to a criminal investigation, that they are not currently suspects, but that they cannot be eliminated without DNA comparison, and that providing a voluntary sample would allow them to be excluded and removed from consideration. Many people, when approached this way, will consent to providing a sample. A cheek swab takes 30 seconds, is completely non-invasive, and provides all the DNA needed for comparison. People who have nothing to hide and who want to be eliminated from an investigation often consent readily. But not everyone will consent. Some people refuse on principle, believing that they should not have to provide DNA to law enforcement without a warrant, even if they are innocent. Some people refuse because they are nervous or because they do not understand what is being asked. And some people refuse because they are guilty, and they know that providing DNA will prove their involvement. When voluntary submission is refused or is not appropriate to request, investigators can use discarded DNA collection. This is exactly what it sounds like. If someone discards an item that contains their DNA, if they throw away a coffee cup or a water bottle or a cigarette butt or a piece of gum or any object they have put in their mouth or handled extensively, that item can be collected from the trash and the DNA on it can be tested. The legal principle is that once you throw something away, you have abandoned any expectation of privacy in it. Trash set out for collection on a public street is considered abandoned property that law enforcement can search without a warrant. The same principle applies to items discarded in public places. If you throw a coffee cup in a trash can at a park or leave a water bottle on a table at a restaurant, you have abandoned that item and any DNA on it is fair game for collection and testing. This technique was famously used in the Golden State Killer case. Investigators identified Joseph DeAngelo as a candidate through forensic genealogy. They needed his DNA to confirm the match, but they did not want to approach him and risk spooking him if he was guilty. So they conducted surveillance, they watched his house, they followed him when he left, and they waited for him to discard something. Eventually, he threw away tissue in a trash can outside a store. Investigators collected the tissue, tested the DNA on it, and confirmed it matched the crime scene DNA from the murders and rapes. That match provided the probable cause for his arrest. Discarded DNA collection is legal. It has been upheld repeatedly in courts, and it is a standard technique in forensic genealogy cases where candidates are identified but voluntary samples cannot be obtained. The challenge is that you have to wait for the person to discard something suitable. You need surveillance to ensure the discarded item actually came from the target individual and was not contaminated by someone else. And you need the discarded item to have sufficient DNA for testing, which most items that have been in contact with saliva or skin will have. The third method for obtaining DNA is through court order. If investigators have developed probable cause to believe that a specific individual committed the crime, they can petition a court for an order compelling that person to provide a DNA sample. Probable cause is a legal standard meaning that there is a reasonable basis to believe the person is guilty based on the available evidence. In the context of forensic genealogy, probable cause might be established through the genetic evidence showing that the person is related to the crime scene DNA, combined with other evidence showing that they fit the profile of the perpetrator based on age, location, and connections to the case. A court-ordered DNA sample is obtained through a buccal swab, the same type of cheek swab used for voluntary samples. The person must submit to the collection, but the actual process is quick and non-invasive. Once collected, the sample is analyzed and compared to the crime scene DNA using the same forensic protocols that would be used for any DNA comparison. Regardless of which method is used to obtain the comparison sample, the analysis is the same. Forensic scientists compare the DNA profile from the candidate to the DNA profile from the glove. They look at the same genetic markers. They determine whether the profiles match. And if they match, the statistical probability that the match occurred by random chance rather than because the samples came from the same person is calculated. DNA match statistics are expressed in terms of the probability that a randomly selected person would have the same profile. For a full DNA profile matching at 20 or more genetic markers, that probability is typically on the order of 1 in trillions or 1 in quadrillions, meaning that it is essentially certain that the two samples came from the same individual. The only exception is identical twins who share identical DNA. When a match is confirmed at that level of statistical certainty, the identification is definitive. The person whose DNA was tested is the person whose DNA was in the glove found near Nancy Guthrie's home. And at that moment, the investigation shifts from identification to building the case for prosecution. Now let me explain why this technique works so well and why it has become such a powerful tool for law enforcement, despite the privacy concerns and the limitations of the databases. The mathematics of genetic relationships means that everyone has a large number of cousins. You have 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 8 great-grandparents, and so on, doubling each generation as you go back. But the doubling does not continue indefinitely because of pedigree collapse, the phenomenon where ancestors appear in multiple positions in your tree because of intermarriage between related families. Still, going back 5 or 6 generations, most people have dozens of distinct ancestral couples. Each of those couples potentially had multiple children. Each of those children potentially had multiple children of their own. And across 5 or 6 generations, the number of descendants of each ancestral couple can be in the hundreds or thousands. What this means is that you have hundreds or thousands of 4th cousins, 5th cousins, and 6th cousins. Most of them you have never met. Most of them you do not know exist. They are descendants of your great-great-great-grandparents or great-great-great-great-grandparents, people who lived in the 1800s, and the family lines have diverged so far that you have no social connection to these distant relatives. But you share DNA with them. Small amounts, but measurable amounts that genetic testing can detect. And if any of them have taken genetic tests and uploaded to genealogical databases, they create the genetic link that allows forensic genealogy to work. Studies have estimated that for Americans of European descent, approximately 60% now have a second cousin or closer match in the major genealogical databases. Approximately 90% have a third cousin or closer match. And nearly 100% have fourth cousin or closer matches because fourth cousins are so numerous that it is statistically almost certain that at least one of your many fourth cousins has tested and uploaded. As the databases grow, these percentages increase. Every person who takes a genetic test and uploads increases the chance that their genetic relatives can be found through database searching. By some estimates, within the next 5 to 10 years, it will become nearly impossible for anyone in the United States to commit a crime that leaves DNA evidence and avoid identification through forensic genealogy, because the databases will have reached effective saturation where everyone has detectable relatives in the system. For the person whose DNA is in the glove from Nancy Guthrie's case, this means that their anonymity depends entirely on whether any of their relatives have uploaded DNA. They cannot control what their cousins do. They cannot prevent second cousins from taking 23andMe tests as Christmas gifts. They cannot stop third cousins from exploring their ancestry through AncestryDNA and uploading to GEDmatch to find more matches, and they cannot erase the genetic connections that tie them to family members who made innocent decisions to learn about their heritage. If any matches are found, if any relatives are in the databases, the genealogists will find them. They will build the trees. They will trace the lines forward. They will identify the descendants, and they will narrow the list until his name is on it, at which point his DNA will be compared directly and the match will be confirmed. Let me walk you through several real cases where this exact process has been used successfully to demonstrate that this is not theoretical. This is how actual investigations have solved actual crimes. The Golden State Killer case in 2018 was the first high-profile example. Joseph DeAngelo committed at least 13 murders and more than 50 rapes across California between 1974 and 1986. DNA evidence existed from multiple crime scenes, but DeAngelo was not in CODIS. Traditional investigative methods had failed for decades to identify him. In early 2018, investigator Paul Holes and forensic genealogist Barbara Ray Venter uploaded crime scene DNA to GEDmatch. They found distant cousin matches. Ray Venter built family trees tracing those matches back to common ancestors in the 1800s. She identified all descendants of those ancestors who fit the age and geographic profile. She narrowed the list to a small number of candidates. DeAngelo was among them. Investigators collected discarded DNA from his trash. It matched. He was arrested in April 2018, charged with 13 counts of murder, and eventually pleaded guilty. A case cold for 40 years was solved in a matter of months through forensic genealogy. The 1987 murder case of Tanya Van Cuylenborg and Jay Cook, a young couple killed in Washington state, was solved in 2018 using the same technique. William Talbot had never been a suspect in traditional investigation. His DNA was not in CODIS, but genealogical database searching found his relatives. Trees were built, descendants were identified. Talbot fit the profile. His DNA was obtained and matched. He was arrested, tried, and convicted. Genetic genealogy took an unsolved double murder from 1987 and brought it to justice 31 years later. April Tinsley was 8 years old when she was abducted and murdered in Fort Wayne, Indiana in 1988. DNA evidence existed but produced no CODIS match for 30 years. In 2018, forensic genealogy was applied. Genetic matches were found. Family trees identified John Miller as a descendant who fit the profile. His DNA matched. He was arrested, pleaded guilty, and was sentenced to 80 years in prison. A child murder that had haunted a community for 3 decades was finally solved. These are not isolated examples. Since 2018, forensic genealogy has been used to solve more than 200 violent crime cases, according to researchers tracking the technique. Murders, rapes, cases cold for 10 years, 20 years, 40 years, 50 years, cases where CODIS had been searched repeatedly over decades and never produced a match. Cases where traditional investigation had exhausted every lead, all solved through the combination of genetic databases and genealogical research. The technique works. It has been validated through hundreds of successful identifications. It has been challenged in court and upheld as constitutional and legally permissible, and it is being applied right now to identify the person whose DNA was in the glove found near Nancy Guthrie's home. Make sure you have liked this video and that you are subscribed to True Crime Vault. Visit our channel to see our coverage of other cases where forensic genealogy played a critical role, and leave a comment below with your thoughts. Do you support the use of genealogical databases for law enforcement in violent crime cases? Do you think privacy concerns outweigh the public interest in solving murders and rapes? How do you balance individual privacy against public safety? These are important questions, and this community has thoughtful perspectives on them. We want to hear what you think. The timeline for forensic genealogy investigations varies depending on several factors. How close are the genetic matches that the database search returns? Second cousin matches lead to faster identification than fourth cousin matches because the family trees are smaller and the common ancestors more recent. How well documented are the family lines? Some families have excellent genealogical records and clear lineages that make research straightforward. Other families have gaps, uncertainties, name changes, adoptions, immigration from countries with poor records, all of which make research harder and slower. How many descendants need to be traced? A common ancestor couple from the early 1900s might have 100 living descendants who can be identified relatively quickly. A couple from the mid-1800s might have thousands of descendants across 6 generations, requiring months of systematic research to identify and trace. How much cooperation and resources are devoted to the case? A high-priority investigation with dedicated forensic genealogists working full-time moves faster than a low-priority cold case worked part-time by a single genealogist. The Golden State Killer case took approximately 4 months from the decision to use forensic genealogy to the arrest of Joseph DeAngelo. But that was in 2018 when the technique was new and methods were still being developed. Since then, as genealogists have gained experience and as tools and techniques have improved, timelines have shortened. Some cases now are solved in weeks rather than months. For Nancy Guthrie's case, several factors suggest the timeline could be relatively fast. The case is extremely high priority given the national media attention and the involvement of Savannah Guthrie. Resources are being devoted at both state and federal levels. The FBI is involved and has access to the best forensic genealogy expertise in the country. Multiple genealogists may be working in parallel on different aspects of the tree building, and investigators have substantial other evidence that can be used to filter and narrow the descendant list once it is built. But timelines are hard to predict. If the database search returns close matches, identification could happen within weeks. If the closest matches are distant cousins and the trees are complex, it could take months. All we can say with confidence is that the work is happening, the process is underway, and identification through forensic genealogy is likely unless the perpetrator is from a family with absolutely no one in genealogical databases, which statistically is becoming less and less probable as the databases grow. The person whose DNA is in that glove may believe they are safe. They wore gloves and a mask to prevent identification. They removed the camera to eliminate visual evidence. They have never been arrested, so their DNA is not in CODIS. They may think they covered their tracks and eliminated the evidence that could identify them. But they could not eliminate their family tree. They could not prevent their cousins from exploring their ancestry. They could not control what their relatives did with their own genetic information. And those relatives, through innocent actions taken for genealogical purposes, have created the trail that leads directly to them. Somewhere in GEDmatch or FamilyTreeDNA, a second cousin uploaded their results, or a third cousin, or a fourth cousin. And that upload, that single act by a relative who has no idea they are connected to this crime, is the thread that forensic genealogists are following right now. They are building the trees. They are identifying the ancestors. They are tracing the descendants. And they are narrowing the list. His name is in that tree somewhere, among the hundreds or thousands of descendants of the common ancestor he shares with his cousins who tested. His name exists. And when the genealogists finish their work, when they filter by age and location and cross-reference against Walmart records and Google searches and cell tower data and every other piece of evidence investigators have developed, his name will be one of the few that remain. And then his DNA will be obtained, whether he consents to provide it voluntarily, whether it is collected from his discarded trash, or whether a court orders him to submit a sample. His DNA will be tested, it will be compared to the glove, and the match will be confirmed. CODIS had no match, but his family tree, built by genealogists using data uploaded by relatives he may never have met, will expose him. It is not a question of if, it is only a question of when. Nancy Guthrie deserves justice. Her family deserves answers. And forensic genealogy, the technique that has solved hundreds of cold cases when traditional methods failed, is the tool that will provide both in this case. The DNA is good quality. The technique works. And the genealogists and investigators working this case right now are following the trail. Subscribe to True Crime Vault. Turn on notifications. Like this video. Visit our channel for comprehensive coverage of other major cases. Leave a comment with your thoughts on whether this technique will successfully identify the perpetrator in this case. And if you have information about Nancy Guthrie's disappearance, contact the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI or the Pima County Sheriff's Department at 520-351-4900. Crime Stoppers accepts anonymous tips and $200,000 in total rewards are available. The forensic genealogy process is underway. CODIS had no match, but that was never going to be the end of the DNA evidence. It was only the beginning of a different approach, a more sophisticated approach, an approach that does not require the perpetrator to be in any database, but only requires that his family tree exists and that some of his relatives have explored their ancestry. They have. The matches will be found, the trees will be built, and his name will emerge from the descendants. His family tree will expose him. And True Crime Vault will be here when it does to break down exactly how the science worked, how the investigation succeeded, and how justice was achieved for Nancy Guthrie.